Hey there, grade 6. New video for you guys. This one is called Formulas for Tables. And so by the end, we will hopefully be able to say that you can produce formulas for something called linear relations given in numerical and geometric forms. Yikes. That is like teacher speak. What you're going to get an opportunity to do is look at some tables and some patterns, some sequence patterns, and do things like identifying gaps between the numbers and then use that information to try to generate like an equation or an algebraic expression for how to get the next numbers, or how to generate the numbers. It sounds kind of complicated. It's actually not. So here's where we're going to start. We're going to be looking at some formulas and some step-by-step rules. And so here we have it says to write the rule for this sequence in two different ways. And so what it gives us is a list of term numbers. Now, if we remember correctly, hopefully we do, I've been showing table of values, and so the term number is going to be going on the left-hand side, and then the term values will be going on the right-hand side. And so the easy one to do right now is to figure out the sequence for the term values. And I'll just skip to the next slide because that's kind of where the information is. So here is that those two sequences, the term numbers and the term values, should say term values here, in a table of values. Okay, so rule number one, and that focuses on going down this way, is to start at 3 and then add 2 every time. Now in the circles, what I'm doing here is I'm identifying the gaps. And that identifying the gaps is going to be really, really important. Now the second rule, rule 2, it talks about how to get from the term number to the term value. And so what they're saying here, and again, this is maybe a bit of a confusing thing, but it says to multiply the term number times 2 and then add 1. So like 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1, I should make a look at proper multiplications, equals 3, right? 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 3 times 2 plus 1 is 7, and so on and so forth, right? So the question is then, how are these rules different? Well, the rules are different is that one uses the term number and the other gives directions on how to get the next number from the previous one. Okay, so one is based, and so the other thing is that rule 2 is based on a variable and rule 1 is not. Then the question is, which is easier to find the 100th term? And I would say that it's probably rule number 2, because if we're using 2 times n, 2 times n, I think I gotta make all these adjustments again on line thickness. Yep, every single time. Love it. 2 times n plus 1. What we can do is actually just do a substitution. That's 2 times 100 plus 1. So that's 200 plus 1, which just equals 201. Now that may have taken me, I don't know, 6 seconds. Whereas this way, you're counting out 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, and you're going to have to count all the way till you get to 100 on your fingers, kind of thing. And that's going to take you longer, okay? Now, so this one is, this stuff here, this 2n plus 1, that's the formula, okay? So then what we're going to be doing is starting to look at producing pattern rules from these sequences. And so what we do is we identify the gaps, and so this is every time it's plus 2. And so once we've identified the gap, then we can say, well, then we start at 3 and add and add 2. And that's our pattern rule. Like when we go along the line like this, that's our pattern rule. Okay. So we started at 3 and add 2 each time. So then a little bit of practice. We're going to be asked to find the pattern rule for this one. So each time 0 to 4 is plus 4, 4 to 8 is plus 4. I know I'm supposed to be drawing circles around them. 8 to 12, also plus 4. So we're identifying that we're adding 4 every time, right? So our pattern rule for this one would be to start at 0 and add 4. That's going to be our pattern rule. Okay. Now, what we're going to be moving on to is coming up with some formulas for sequences that do not vary directly with the term number. And so what we see is we have this sequence of numbers, 3, 6, 9, 12. They're asking us to make a table for this sequence. And so that's fine, no problem. So put the term numbers over here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, because we have the first 4 terms. This is the term value, and this goes 3, 6, 9, 12. So the first thing that we try to do is to identify the gaps. That's really the first thing we have to do. So each time it's plus 3, right? 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 3 is 9, 9 plus 3 is 12, okay? Then the question says, how can you find the value of the term from the term number? In other words, we're trying to get from this column to this column by doing an operation. And you can say, well, that's plus 2, and that's plus 4, and that's plus 6, and that's plus 8. That's not, it has to be, you have to be able to do the same thing to each term number to get to the term value. And so if it's adding like that, and you're adding a bigger number every time, that is not the way to do it, okay? And so what we do, and what we can use the gap for, we've identified the gap, is saying, okay, where I'm going to start is I'm going to multiply each term number by 3. I've identified that the gap is plus 3, so I'm going to use that information to multiply the term number times 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. Now, I've identified that that's all I have to do. To get from the term number to the term value, all I have to do is multiply by 3. Okay, so that one is pretty straightforward to find the pattern rule. Sorry, that's not the pattern rule. The pattern rule start at 3 and add 3 every time. The formula, right? The formula would be, again, so this is n times 3, or 3n. That would be the formula to get to from the term number to the term value. Once you get into grade 7 and onto grade 8, what you would do is you would say, well, if I had a variable, just extend this line, if it was the nth term, I would say 3 times n will tell me whatever this is. So if it's the 100th term, the term value is going to be 300. If it's the 50th term, it's going to be 150, because every time I'm just multiplying by 3. I don't want to labor the point too long, but that's really what we do. So here's a little bit extra stuff in terms of figuring out, and this is what the book practices on page 94, so you really need to sort of pay attention and get reasonably comfortable with this as well. And again, I will alter my line thickness. I wish it was a smaller line. Anyway, so my input goes just numerically 1, 2, 3, 4. I have the first 4 numbers here. Then I'm going to skip this for just a quick sec. Okay, and then so my output here is 7, 10, 13, and 16. These are my term values. This is my term numbers, okay? So what I have to do is I have to figure out the gap first. That's the first thing I have to do. So to get from 7 to 10, I'll do a different color. It's plus 3. I'm going to add 3 every single time. Now, I said in the last slide that what we can do with that information is that we can use that to say, so you multiply the input times the gap. This stuff is the gap. So 1 times the gap, the input times the gap, is going to be 3. Don't worry, it's not 7 yet. It will be, okay? 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 3 is 12. Now, what we have to do from that is we look at this middle column and say, okay, multiplying by the gap number, in this case it's times 3, only got me to 3. To get from 3 to 7, what I need to do is then do some addition or subtraction. In this case, I need to add 4 to all of these numbers, right? So I multiply the input or the term number by the gap. Then I look at what I have to add or subtract. So 3 plus 4 gets me 7. 6 plus 4 gets me 10. 9 plus 4 gets me 13. 12 plus 4 gets me 16. So the general rule, and you're going to need to identify this, right? So we've multiplied the input times 3, then we've added 4. So the formula becomes n times 4, sorry, not n times 4, n times 3, n times 3 plus 4, or I could say 3n plus 4. So let's try one more, okay? So here's my inputs, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my output, 5, 9, 13, 17. I have to identify gaps. To get from 5 to 9 is plus 4, 9 to 13 is plus 4, 13 to 17 again is plus 4. So this is my gap. They should almost have like a little gap column here. But anyway, that's my gap. So multiply the input times the gap. So 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 4 is 12, and then 4 times 4 is 16. Then look at what I have to add or subtract to get from this number to the output, and in this case it's plus 1, right? So the general rule is multiply by 4, add 1, and then my formula is going to be n times 4 plus 1, or I could say 4n plus 1. And you're going to need to practice that on page 94 and a little bit on page 95, right? Now, just a little word of caution here. This only works if the gap numbers are constant, if you're always adding 4, if you're always adding 5, if you're always adding 11, or whatever the number is. If you're adding different numbers, if it's like plus 3, plus 5, plus 7, plus 9, and that's the way the gap works, that method will not work. Okay, so it's got to be constant. The last thing we're going to do is look at, there are some diagrams here. Now, we can make a table of values. So again, we have term number, term value. Actually, maybe it's more useful to follow that method just for a quick sec. Right, so I'm term value, and then this will be term number, or the input times the gap. Right, so I have 1, 2, 3, and then it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So every time the gap here is plus 3. So then I take 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9. Now notice, instead of adding here, I'm actually going to have to subtract. I'm going to have to subtract 2. So then what I would say for my formula is going to be n times 3 minus 2, or 3n minus 2. And there will be several questions on the sheet that deal with subtraction like that. So just be aware that that is a thing that's going to happen as well. Okay, other than that, that's really all I need to point out in terms of this this topic and these pages. It's pages 93 to 95 in your workbook. Thanks for watching and have a great day.